City Council work session. Right now we're in work session, so there's going to be no public comment, but we do have a formal session scheduled tonight at 7 p.m. So if you have comments on anything on our agenda or anything at all that is related to our work as City Council, please come to our 7 p.m. formal meeting. And then you can also send us your comments by mail at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, email at council.comments@slcgov.com, or on the phone by 801-5357-654. So we'll jump into our work session items. The first one is updates from the administration. And Katie Schnell is here, and Andrew Johnston from the mayor's office. Thank you for being here with us.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. I am Katie Schnell. I'm one of the executive assistants in the mayor's office. I'm the EA for Jennifer Newell, the senior advisor for education, and Weston Clark, who's the director of community outreach. And I also manage the ACE Fund in the mayor's office. And I'm here to give the updates today. We can go to our first slide. So as a reminder, this is our webpage for residents to go and engage with the city. Next slide. We have one update from Public Lands on Donner Trail Park. Public Lands staff have analyzed the feedback collected from phase 1 of engagement for Donner Trail Park. The report and findings can be found on the project website linked on the feedback page shown earlier. The feedback will be used to help develop the concept designs for the park. Once the concept designs become available, another round of engagement will be conducted to finalize the vision for the park. And from the mayor's office, as a reminder, we have the community outreach team having office hours this week. There are 3 opportunities this week. The first is tomorrow on the 15th at Red Moose Cafe. And then on Thursday, the 16th, we'll have staff at Tizanti. And then on Friday, the 17th at Library Square, we will have Tim from our team at the Homeless Resource Fair. Next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, I do manage the ACE Fund for the mayor's office, so I'm excited to let you know that applications are now open, and we'll be taking applications through Friday, December 1st. So for those that are not familiar with the fund, ACE stands for Arts, Culture, and Events, and it's a grant opportunity for community events through Salt Lake City. We've seen quite the increase in interest in the fund, and we receive a growing number of applications each year, which is very exciting to see all the new and great events happening in Salt Lake. But I will note it does make it quite a competitive grant. So we have a $200,000 budget. Last year we received about 200 applications, and from those we were able to fund about 108 events. So hoping that it is just as popular this year, and I want to encourage applicants to submit strong applications and tell us why their event really matters to Salt Lake City. We do hold information sessions to share information about the grant and answer any questions that folks might have who are applying. We have 2 of those left. One is tomorrow, the 15th. It's going to be 5:30 to 6:30 at Glendale Mountain View Community Learning Center. And this information session is actually going to be completely in Spanish. And I want to give a shout out to Alicia from our community outreach team, who's kind of been leading out on that and teaming up with me for that. And then we have our final info session, which will be on Monday, November 27th, 6 to 7 p.m. We're going to be at the shop. Thanks to the Utah Black Chamber for hosting us there. And that's the Monday before applications close on that Friday, so people can have an opportunity to get their last minute questions answered. I'd encourage everyone to check out the ACE website, linked on the mayor's office page for information on the grant and to apply if you're interested, or you can reach out to me with any questions. My contact info is also on the website. And that is it from me, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Katie. Councilmembers, any questions from community engagement? All right, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next slide, thank you. You'll see on the slide up here, this is the same flyer you saw last week, I believe. It's the updated one for November for all the overflow options, both the resource centers, West Valley Shelter. I don't believe Code Blue's on there yet, but you can get a sense of hours and times and ways to get into these places. So I'll make sure that's aware. You can have that on your social media websites as well if you'd like that to disseminate to the public. Next slide. You'll see on this slide we've got the term functionally full. I want to get back to that in a second for a discussion of capacity. You'll also see encampment impact mitigation work will be primarily on the river. You'll see 17 South, kind of the south end of the river. The rapid intervention team will be on the north end of the river at the latter part of this week as well. You'll see the temporary other resource fair, the last resource fair is this Friday at Library Square with Valley Behavioral Health. Looking forward to that. And then the temporary or micro shelter community. We call it temporary shelter community. The state is using the term micro shelter community for their second phase. So I want to put that term in front of you so you don't get confused later on. You can see that the buildings are up. I believe the AC and heating units are in there. Electricity is being installed this week. And then the water is also hooked up. I think the next thing to be done there would be the fencing. The interior fencing will go in. We'd anticipate that the state RFP process, the second effort in this, will complete by the end of this month and have an operator named at that point. Any questions on that piece?
Council members, any questions?
No, just once again, remind the people that are listening, if you have clothes, please donate, bring them to the third floor. I'll be there on Friday at the booth. We need volunteers to fold and give away the clothes and also the snacks and food at this resource fair, so at the public library. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Valdemros. Councilmember Young?
Thank you. Andrew, just one follow-up question. Once the RFP concludes, what is realistic in terms of that site actually being functional? Like, is that going to be projected like 4 to 6 weeks?
It probably depends a lot on who the provider is.
Okay.
A larger established provider who might be able to move existing staff over could probably get it up and running more quickly. A new provider who's going from scratch would need a bit of time to hire up. I'd say the hiring process usually takes, I'll say, a month to be safe, to be quick about it. But it would kind of depend on who that is.
Okay, so once a provider is named, I'm sure that that'll be public information, but I'd love to understand from their point of view what their timeline is expected in terms of being ready to go.
Yeah, I believe that would be public information as soon as they're willing to talk about it. I think everybody wants to know who that is, and they want to hit the ground running quickly. So they're going to want to support, I'm guessing. So we'll do a lot of work and make sure you're involved in that.
Great, thank you.
Councilmembers, any other questions?
There's one more slide as well, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. And
Yeah,
we can
please.
talk about, go to the next slide, I'll talk about functionally full. So you'll see here that at the top I have the existing winter shelter options, which you're aware of. Resource centers with additional beds above their usual capacity. West Valley Shelter, the MVP coming online, the temporary shelter community, and St. Vincent de Paul. Now, Code Blue is an above and beyond this. Code Blue is new to this to the state this year in state statute. It basically says that the State Department of Health and Human Services will monitor weather conditions across the entire state, and when the weather condition in a particular county hits a threshold of 15 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and that includes wind chill, then the state can declare a Code Blue situation in that county, and they've already started this year. That means in that county, there's an expectation that shelter beds would be made available. In our county, that means additional shelter beds. And Salt Lake County is taking the lead on that in at least 2 locations. And then after those 2 locations, flexing the resource center is even larger based on the statute. And any other options they can provide as needed. And then also more basic needs items for outreach. As a part of this, the state also limits the ability of cities to enforce no camping ordinances during those situations. So if the state declares a Code Blue situation in Salt Lake County for 24 hours, 8 a.m. to say 8 a.m. the next morning, during that period of time, the city cannot enforce a no camping ordinance and can't take certain basic living items from folks who are outside. It also extends to 48 hours after that Code Blue. So essentially for a 24-hour Code Blue, it would be about 3 days when a city could not enforce in the same way that we might otherwise expect a city to do so. We want to make sure people are aware of this provision in state code right now because it will impact potentially some of our activities as a city. Now, the intention of this is to ensure everybody has a safe place to be during those really cold temperatures. Our preference, obviously, is for everyone to be inside, and that's why the Code Blue additional beds are put in there. And that's why there's all this effort to ensure that there's not disruption to folks who are just trying to bed down and be warm. Now, all of that being said, that depends on shelter capacity. And so the state is coming up with rules to identify if all the shelters in that county are full by state definition, that's when we cannot enforce no camping ordinance. If there is capacity based on the state rule, then any municipality can continue to enforce their laws appropriate to no camping as usual. Does that make sense? So the state has not declared, to my knowledge, at least this point, exactly what that threshold is. When I put functionally full on the previous slide as far as capacity right now, you know that for the last 8 months or so, since May, the resource centers have run at about 99% capacity on average every night, the existing resource centers. That's pretty normal. That also means there's a small number of beds that will come available during a 24-hour time at those facilities potentially. But what happens is it doesn't mean there's a bed available at every hour all day long. It's not one bed was open all 24 hours. When you think about the operations of a resource center, you have, in our case, 200 beds in our resource centers based on the conditional use permit. Now, that is meant to mean, I think in our code, that you can only have 200 people enrolled in that program at the same time. So 200 people have a bed, are enrolled in the program through an official process at intake, and are assigned to that bed. Now, during a 24-hour period, you may have everyone there the whole time, but you may have a number of beds where people leave and new people come in. So officially, you had more than 200 people in your facility during 24-hour time, which would mean technically you may override our CUP if you interpret it that way. We don't. We want to make sure they're full. And so we have, in the state at least, the ability to count beds based on a point in time during the day, one day. And during the 24-hour period, here's how many people were in a bed. And it was at 7 a.m. every day as for the official count. So you'll see that functionally full might mean that you've got more than 200 people during a 24-hour process. It might be there's slightly less. It might be somebody who was in there most of the day and left early in the morning, and it was available for 2 hours. It might mean that you had multiple people come in and out during the daytime. So when we talk about full, when you're talking about a shelter, it's a very fluid sort of definition. That's why the state needs to come up with a parameter, a threshold for all of us to live by to say, when it hits this, 95%, 98%, whatever it might be, that's when, by definition, over a 24-hour period or 2 days, whatever they're going to define it as, they are full, and therefore we have restrictions on us. That might be a little confusing. It's okay. We can talk about it as we go into the wintertime as it hits us. But I want to make sure we're clear, a little more clear, that 200 beds can mean multiple people in those beds at times, or person in the bed for a long period of time and not the entire 24 hours. The resource centers do their best to fill them up. I'll say last winter, the Geraldine E. King Resource Center for Women, when they saw at night, at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, that they had a number of beds still empty, that people hadn't come back in for some reason or checked in that day. They would actually set up cots and bring in enough people to get to that 200-bed threshold during the nighttime, so they were not under capacity, but they were replacing those beds temporarily, and in the morning, they take the cots down and then they go through the process again. That's one way you keep full 200-bed capacity without getting somebody's reservation sort of taken away because they're doing things. So we can talk through more of that. This particular issue came up at the State Utah Homelessness Council recently, and so I want to make sure we address it here, and we can keep talking about this as we go forward so you understand it and the public understands what capacity means in the resource centers. That was a lot.
Council members, follow-up questions? I guess my question is MVP shelter, 165 beds, but not yet.
Correct.
ASAP means?
As soon as possible. I am definitely hoping in December. They've got the okay from the Sandy City. I think they're doing their renovations and their staffing issues right now to staff up to that. So hopefully we'll have an update soon.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, I think we were all for a very brief time living in a situation that we hadn't experienced in our memory. That there was 100 beds available, but hopefully we can get back to that. Plenty of shelter beds available for anyone who wants it.
I'll say that the good news, council members, is that functionally full means a lot of people are inside today
Right.
getting shelter. It's not they're avoiding it. It's not people don't want to come in. We've filled up hundreds and hundreds of beds of people who will come in if we give them the option. There are a handful outside still. There are a number of folks who are still outside, some of which would come in if we have more beds, some of which are struggling with different things, and we're doing outreach to them. But clearly, when we offer the shelter options, people will take them.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Andrew, any other type of shelter, non-governmental related, like churches, that are going to be available at all in the county or in the city? Because there was something in the news that Utah County is doing. Some Utah County churches are doing something. So do we know of any here?
Yeah, so the news article you referenced was about warming centers in a couple of churches in Utah County, I believe. We've done warming centers in this county in previous years. This year, the choice was made to go to full shelter beds so that the Second and Second Coalition, Salt Lake County, will open overnight shelter beds to sleep in on a 24-hour basis based on Code Blue needs. And then the additional beds for the wintertime, this up to 600 beds we've talked about, is our response in this county versus doing, say, a warming center situation, which was what they're doing, I believe.
All right. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Puig.
So, quick question. So, we're hoping Sandy's shelter comes online soon. Obviously, they're working through that, and the approval's been done. So that was good, and we hope the state selects a provider for the, what do we call it now? Temporary shelter, mini
Micro- yeah,
shelter,
either
micro
one.
shelters. And here in town. So we're talking about how many beds here? Like about 200 beds between those two, or is it
215.
Yeah,
215 beds additional that will come in online soon? And do we anticipate that will be enough? And I guess it's I have struggled with the point on count and how to try to find out if we really need more. And the state, and attending that press conference last week with our mayor and the governor and some other state leaders, saying that we need to be tougher with our laws and whatnot. And it's when the shelter beds are available, sure, and that we had a situation where our city did that, but the beds became unavailable because they are being used. So how do we communicate to the state that we are willing to do our part? As we always been willing to do our part. We are doing a lot more than by statute we require, and just because we feel the need. But are we communicating to the state as far as back to say, look, we cannot do that anymore. Now we're waiting for those beds. We're hoping for more funding on this for temporary shelter, and I just don't want to make sure that the community also understands that this is beyond is outside our hands in some ways, right? And the providing and finding the shelter for so many of people out there, it's something that we cannot solve ourselves alone. And we are pushing, but I want to make sure that the state also understands, and I know that there are good partners now in this county, and we're moving the needle, but maybe for many people in the community and for those that are not, they are on the streets, they feel like we're not going fast enough. There's always that feeling, and I get that. But how do we communicate to the state and to, the office of the governor that we need more funding for this? And I know that you are talking to, Niederhauser, who's been a fantastic, leader on the state level to get us more funding. But are they understanding clearly that we have limited resources and limited power on this issue, and and how do we communicate to this? The second part of that question is, how do we communicate to the neighbors when this Code Blue is triggered, and when do we have enough beds available that we can actually, do some more enforcement as indicated in the books, to make sure that there's clarity. Is there a website that says there is this amount of beds available, so then municipalities are allowed to do this, or they're not bed available, so limited enforcement on no camping across the board. I just want to make sure that we're all working through the same information, and then our neighbors that are struggling with some of the issues related to homelessness, and also the people on the streets, get the same information at the same time. And I don't know how to solve that. I'm trying to myself answer this. And you've been in this seat, literally this seat before, and you understand the concerns from the neighbors, and you understand the concerns from those unsheltered neighbors too. So I don't know if this question made any sense, but I guess I'm sharing frustration in general about how complicated this is, and it is. But I just wanted to share that I hope that our partners at the state level understand that that was a good example of how, when you put more beds available, we can actually get to a better place for those on the streets and also for the neighbors that are struggling, and we need more.
Well, council member, I think you did a good job talking through it right now for the public on record. From my experience, I'll say this. I think that the frustration that you feel, that the public feels, that elected leaders feel, that I feel at times is genuine. It's an emotional response to something that feels uncontrolled or scary or dangerous or something that's foreign in some ways. I think sometimes we also maybe underestimate all of our abilities to handle complex concepts and to know that nuance and difficulty and struggle is a part of issues like this. And when we sit down and talk to folks, oftentimes when we get past the emotional response we have, we can hear people talk very rationally about the pros and cons, the balances, the gives and takes of these issues. I think people can grasp that quite a bit, particularly the humanitarian piece of this part. So I think that's an important piece to remember for all of us as we talk through this. Say it is complex, it is difficult, it does feel like it's slow, but we also understand the give and take of folks struggling with mental illness or trauma. We understand the lack of shelter beds at times or housing struggles we all face in this city, in this county, in this state. We can understand those pressures. And the more we work together on that, which is what the mayor's done a very good job of talking with the governor and the county mayor and our business leaders about, and understand that we all want to do our part, a city part as well. And there's also the reality that we will continue to enforce, and you've seen this recently in our city, to enforce our ordinances, but lead it with the outreach. So when we go out and we're talking to folks who are camping or outside during the daytime, we are constantly leading with, we can get you a bed inside. That's our first thing. Let's get you inside. If they don't, won't, can't, whatever it is, problem solve, do our best to figure out storage for their stuff, pets, partners if they're with somebody else, whatever the issues are, feeling unsafe. And if we can't do that, we do still have to enforce. So the mayor's been very, very clear in saying that we are enforcing, and we are going to be very clear in watching our shelter numbers and the options available to us and tie those two together. And it doesn't mean we don't enforce. It means that we have to be realistic when we offer our services and continue to do that repeatedly, because this is not something we're going to solve in a couple weeks or even one winter time. It's going to be, we're setting the precedent now for how we handle this going forward as far as we do enforcement, we do a lot of good outreach, and with our partners, we have more shelter availability. We have more services for behavioral health needs. We have more housing on the back end. So yes, it is slow at times, but progress is being made, and you saw that in the press conference. You see this in the numbers today and the folks going inside out of the cold. You see progress being made, and we have to keep thinking of that and talking to each other about that and reinforcing that we make progress, we'll get there, but it's going to take some time and a communal effort.
All right, I think we need to move on. Appreciate that for updates from the administration. The next item is an ordinance follow-up about the affordable housing incentives ordinance. Nick Tarbett from Council Policy staff will come introduce this item yet again. Nick, if you don't mind, Nick, if you don't mind, just maybe reminding council the things that we have already straw polled, and let's try and focus the discussion on the the outstanding items that we've yet to discuss.
Yeah, so last week the council took a series of straw polls that revolved around the incentives structure, both in the Type B and Type C sections. There was a straw poll about defining what the maximum height of an additional story at 12 feet, and then also adding improvements to what is required for the application. And there was one straw poll that did fail that would have removed 3 and 4 unit structures from the permitted type of housing allowed in single family zone areas. So that would stay, so up to 4 units would still be allowed. Today's efforts, if I recall correctly, would be to focus on the enforcement and the auditing and reporting sections of the ordinance for council members to have any questions on that, to bring those up today.
All right, yep, that's matches my memory. Council members, let's just jump right into questions. I know that there were some on, as Nick said, enforcement and then the reporting.
I don't have many questions. It
Councilmember
seems
Puig.
like we have talked about this and for literally months now, but I appreciate that we have improved, I believe, last week on this, and I'm looking forward to look at that. But I personally don't have any more questions at the moment, but maybe after the conversation.
I just have, I guess, a question. I'm not sure if it's related to those two, but to that request that I had that as we move forward with this, that we also do a contingent upon having an ordinance where there's some sort of remedy to a property that may be impacted, to a next door property that may be impacted by the construction of new housing. Because as of today, we don't have that for any damage in any property caused by the neighbor construction. So any movement on that, Nick?
So our understanding that, so staff has prepared a motion for when this is adopted to have that, put that in place so that that legislative action will begin and the administration can start working on that. My understanding is the attorney's office, Katie can correct me if I'm wrong, has started research on that based off the questions she's received. So we know there are efforts already working to bring that ordinance to the council for consideration. It sounds like you're asking that this ordinance be adopted contingent upon that one being adopted first. And I guess that would be something for you or colleagues, for you and your colleagues to discuss if that's what you would like to have happen.
My memory was that was what Nick Tarbett just mentioned, that we were going to do legislative action to initiate that happening at the same time, not having it completed. But if that's, I guess we should discuss that right now. I would prefer that we, since that's such a new thing, I would prefer that we still adopt this, but we have that on the record that we intend to fix that piece of the ordinance. I know that would be my preference.
That's not my preference.
And I support that, and you have my commitment to support this, and I think that's something that I agree with. I just don't want to, perfect be the enemy of good. This and stopping or slowing down a good ordinance that I prefer to work through that, and I know the administration is working on that and the attorney. So you have my support on that. I think that's a big deal. You both had cases in your districts and that are important to note. But I prefer to move forward with the ordinance and state it on the motion that we're gonna that we are interested on that piece as well.
Councilmember Young?
And then maybe Chris.
There we go. So I too am supportive of being able to move forward related to some of these specific incidents where we have individual property owners who are being impacted despite the fact that it is not their property who is kind of initiated in this space. I still think, so I'll tell you, I am trying to find a balance between the fact that this is a new initiative and that we're going to need to figure out things on the back end in terms of implementation and follow-up versus some of those items that I think we absolutely just need to be able to get clear on, as opposed to having them be we'll figure that out afterwards. And so although I feel like, yes, I understand that this is one that could be kind of in that space of afterwards, I do still have, at least some follow-up questions related to more of that enforcement piece that I would like to discuss at some point.
Councilor Valdemoros.
I think like it's the right time to do that now. This is obviously most of us are in favor of these incentives, but we've had so many, I think too many cases where we have the property owners come talk to us about an issue that happened with the construction next door, and the city has said, hey, we have no recourse for you, this is a civil matter. And then it does pose a question that a lot of us pose here about who can afford attorney's fees, and is that fair or not? And so if we're adding a lot of housing, especially in the west side that are usually lower income neighborhoods, part in District 4, I would like to have this solved now because it's enough issues that we have that I think it warrants that we do it now and not later, so that we're fair across the board. And it's not like a new idea. I think it's been going on for a while, but that issue, so now to me, it would be the best time to do it now. We are doing a lot. Like we're going to add a lot of housing into Salt Lake City. I don't want to have these conversations with the neighbors. Hey, I'm sorry, but the city doesn't have any recourse for you. And yeah, we said that we're going to add more housing in the neighborhood. So good luck. Sorry that your older home got damaged, and go find an attorney and pay for it and figure it out. That is not the answer that I want for my neighbors. I don't want to have these conversations ever again, because we gave somebody a permit to go build something and then the damage happened to a property and we have no recourse for that property owner. So that's my
I
position.
think Councilor Wharton was next, or did you not have a comment, Councilor Wharton?
No, I do. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, when I first raised this, my intention and my hope was that we could, because what I was proposing to add and the language that I gave to all of you, I think is pretty, largely a restatement of what is already true. That it was something that we could do at the same time. I also understand, though, that anytime we're putting anything into the code, that it needs to be like thoroughly researched. I guess my concern is that, and I very much appreciate the support of all of you, and I appreciate that staff has given us the option of having a motion. I would feel better if we had, some sort of timeline or some sort of, what makes me nervous is to say we have the intention to add this and we're going to add it and it's going to be sometime soon. And I worry about it getting lost in lots of other priorities. I mean, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now, we talked about the landscaping and xeriscaping and redoing that ordinance being a priority, and we still haven't seen that. So that's something that I worry about. So
we do have that now.
That's exciting. That's exciting, but I don't want to. Yeah. So to put it very as fine as I can, if it's going to be like a 3-year wait, that's not something that I'm comfortable with. And I feel like the only way to make it happen faster is to tether it to something like this. If it's going to be something that we can expect, early in the new year, that is something I am comfortable with.
Let me ask this question, a follow-up though. So you will be okay moving this, and I think I appreciate you bringing this up. And a couple of meetings ago, and we've been discussing this ordinance for longer than that, right? And I appreciate that you had a specific case that triggered this question, and but you will be okay adding a date or some sort of time frame to that motion and moving ahead with the motion.
Yes.
So giving the administration, the attorneys, time to work through the language, but adopting an ordinance. Okay.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
So
And what happens if we cannot, if the administration and the attorney's office cannot meet that deadline, and then something gets built within this ordinance, and then the neighbor comes and says, "Hey, this happened."
hold on, I need to bring something up though, because I understand why it seems like those two ordinances are tied together, and I understand that in some cases, the affordable housing incentives could mean that there is a construction project that happens that wouldn't have happened otherwise, but it's not going to happen 1 inch closer to the property line than what can already happen. So to tether it to this, I think you have to tether it to a full moratorium on any construction in the city, which I don't think any of us would support. But this new affordable housing incentives does absolutely nothing to make construction allowed any closer to the property lines in any of the single family districts than what is already allowed. So to me, we're combining two things that I understand why they feel related, but really are truly not. So if we're saying this item about enforcement of building licenses and whatever else is so important that no construction should happen, then we need to be talking about a full moratorium of all construction in the city. But I don't think any of us would support that. So I don't know why it's this one ordinance that's being shackled because of that item. And that's where I'm supportive of this issue, but I'm not supportive of tying it to something else.
Will you be supportive of, Councilmember Wharton's motion of going along with legislative intent and putting some sort of time frame into that legislative intent?
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I know that we're making promises that other people have to keep for us because we're not the attorney's office, and
Let's
so
ask the attorney's office.
that's
what's
where
realistic.
I'm worried about putting a random date on it.
Well,
but saying that it's a high priority for us, yes, I'm okay with that.
I would like to ask the attorney's office that know their
Katie, do
timelines
you
and their
Have a response
resources.
or need time for that?
Hi there, council members. So the revisions to Title 18 are currently in the early engagement process, and then we'll need to go to the Planning Commission. The revisions that we are hearing from your legislative intent would be included in that, so we can get them done quickly, but then the Planning Commission process, Nick Norris isn't there. Nick, I don't know what the time frame is going into 2024 on Planning Commission agendas.
Yeah, it simply depends on how many applications are ripe at the time, right? So typically, there's about I want to say there's about a 2-meeting wait right now once something's ready. So
To what?
a 2-meeting wait. So for example, we had 5 items or 6 items on the Planning Commission agenda last week, and it went till after 10 p.m. at night. So 5-hour meetings are not unusual right now for the Planning Commission.
I thought that when I first proposed this and we had some of the initial conversations that we weren't even sure that it had to go to the Planning Commission. Are we sure that it does now?
We've concluded that because Title 18 refers to the building code under Utah law, that does have to go to the Planning Commission.
Okay. So, I understand what you're saying, Councilmember Mono, and I don't want to delay, especially if it has to go through the Planning Commission. I really don't want to delay this moving forward on affordable housing incentives because I think it's really important. But it's not just about the property line. Like one of the instances that I brought up is about construction on the property line, but I'm talking about multiple instances, including ones where they're, digging out underneath one house and it's destabilizing the houses next door. It doesn't necessarily just come down to the property line. That's just one example. And again, as a legislator, there are only certain powers that I have, and one of them is to, where I do believe that there is a connection, is to pass this legislation somehow with a connection between the two of them, and I need to have some assurance that this is going to not get pushed aside. That's all I'm saying. So if there can be something in the ordinance that does give a timeline, obviously we can adjust that timeline if needed. But I'm not comfortable saying we're going to do it in the future, and I'm not comfortable saying we all agree it's a priority. I need something more than that.
I just don't know what that looks like with the tools that we have, except for not adopting this ordinance.
No, I think that the one that Councilmember Pui raised is acceptable. I think that's fine.
I think we have found some compromise there that works for both, regardless if we agree or not that they're tight or not. I think what they're trying to mitigate is future construction, at least in that way, and trying to mitigate some of the impacts on some of the neighbors. I'm supportive of that, and I get it. So just a realistic timeline. If we think that we are a couple meetings. So what are we talking about? February? We're talking about a little longer than that. What do we think? How long did that? I'm just with plus 25% time, plus 50.
So January planning commission agendas are probably already full because we only have one meeting in December, and so November and December creates a backlog, and that usually gets relieved in January. So I don't know exactly when the 45-day engagement period ends, but on this particular proposal that's been referenced, but it would probably, the earliest it would probably be to the planning commission would probably be sometime in February, and then we'd have the transmittal process after that, and that's assuming that the planning commission makes a recommendation at that meeting. Sometimes with text amendments they want to ask for some changes, just like the council does. They want to get more information, things like that.
So can we say, I don't know if this is something that is workable though, but I'm just seeing, throwing the spaghetti at the wall, see what something sticks. So could we say, that that this council hopes to have this ordinance through the process, ultimately that is transmitted, and is it transmitted back to us? Right, for final adoption.
The Title 18 stuff would be sent, would have to go through that transmittal process from Planning Commission, administration to council office.
Could we say that by April, by the end of April, we hope to see that back, and obviously if it doesn't happen, hopefully to get informed back, and so we are updated to the process. Is that a realistic timeline?
From the attorney's office drafting perspective, it is. I think we can be in close contact with planning and try to get it on that planning commission agenda so you all have time to consider it. The motion language, I think, would have a specific date that the affordable housing incentives would go into effect. And so essentially you're setting that in the future for us to do this other part, and then hopefully it's all done and it goes into effect on that date in April. That's what I'm hearing.
I was not going that direction. I was going on the direction of adopting the ordinance immediately and setting up a timeline that triggers the pushes is not the right, incentivizes the finishing of this ordinance regarding the damage on the property between the properties by that April date.
I think Councilmember Petro had some comment to make. It's hard to see from our viewpoint when she's ready to speak, but Councilmember Petro, are you?
Yeah,
We need a councilman.
Screen where her face shows.
Mr. Chair, she's left for just a moment from the meeting.
I guess what I'm hearing is, do we approve this with actual contingent implementation on this other ordinance? I would not support that, but I understand that other people might. So maybe that's the straw poll that we need to make right now. I'm okay being signaling as strongly as we're able to with the tools that we have to the administration and the attorney's office that this is important to us. But I don't support a contingent implementation of it. And I think if other council members do, that's something we should straw poll.
Well, not contingent implementation, just the enactment. Or, it wouldn't start until, it wouldn't be contingent, but it wouldn't start until this specified date.
But does it not start if the Title 18 changes are not made?
Well, that's not what I understood Katie was saying. I was saying that Katie was saying that we would pass it, we would pass the affordable housing incentives now, but the enactment date of that would be at this date that this is set, and that's when people could actually start submitting applications under the affordable housing incentive.
I don't love that, but I'm okay with that if other council members, that I'm not going to die on that hill. If other council members think that future enactment date is appropriate, I understand the development timeline for a project is long anyway, so at least it gives people the opportunity to start planning their projects. So if that's important, I'm okay with that. But the line that I'm not ready to go to is that if Title 18 is not changed and adopted within X period of time, then this never goes into effect. I'm not supportive of that. But if this goes into effect in 6 months and we're going to try as hard as we can to change Title 18 within those 6 months, I think that's the limit of where my support would go. But saying that it undoes affordable housing incentives if Title 18 is not adopted is too far for me. Councilmember Young?
Yep. So I support that approach because, to be really honest, I still think that there are questions where we have staff that are working on getting us answers. And I think it would also give us that opportunity to be able to have those answers out available and more transparent for everyone in the comprehensive community. To be able to say, like, okay, so we're moving forward with this. Let's develop those frequently asked questions. Let's develop those follow-up components that are probably and I appreciate staff's position where it's like, how much of that do you develop when the ordinance is still under conversation? But I think could really help clarify a lot of the aspects of this for the greater community, as well as giving time related to the Title 18 component. And to the question at hand, so I am also not currently to a space where I feel like if that title is not ready, that we would then not move forward. But I think setting that date does set an expectation for forward progress to be able to have that holistic environment ready to go.
Yeah, and I also would not want to go that far. So I think we're on the same page.
Okay, good.
We're on the same page.
So I guess we need to decide what the date is.
Right.
Now, because that will have to be in the motion, right?
So I suggested, the end of April, but April 15th.
April 30th. There you go. Give you 15 more days. 2 more weeks.
So 5 months, essentially, is what we're saying. I'm really looking at Nick because I think the drafting is probably less of the process than Planning Commission, and then ensuring that you all can get it on your agendas too.
Yeah, I guess that the question I have is, what is the meaning of that date? Council action or delivered to the council to take action? Because I think those are two totally different.
Yeah,
time
some
frames.
of that timeline we are eating. I guess is the question:
Yes.
is it part of that? Are we part of the timeline or not?
I would say delivery to us.
Deliver to us. I think I'm comfortable with us
But,
with that.
Yeah,
That gives you that
I don't
all time
foresee-
and planning commission.
I don't foresee any issues with not
Okay.
being able to do that.
And granted that we hope to see it before that, but if not, then
That's the
that's
deadline.
okay.
I have a question for Katie.
And I would say if we can do any of it earlier, then we should
Even
do any
better.
of it earlier.
So, does someone want to take a stab at a straw poll for that? What we just, I think we're in agreement of?
I have a question for Katie about the Title 18 and what it means if we're on the same page. So I'm okay with what's happened so far, but the difference between Councilmember Wharton and my request was Carlos Wharton was talking about the surveying of the property, so it was very clear where my property is versus neighbors and where the construction should happen. But mine was more about who is responsible for the damage of the next door property if we give a permit to a certain contractor and they went ahead and had issues and now the older property is wrecked. So is that under Title 18, will we see some recourse for a property owner to come to us or go to an insurance or whatever it is so that they can get that damage repaired?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember. We're exploring those ideas. The city attorney's office, of course, represents the city as the entity and wants to be very cautious about advising on anything that where the city would be in the middle of or taking responsibility for a dispute between property owners. But we're looking into language that would help clarify what happens when one property owner damages another property and who takes responsibility for that. We'd like to brief you on that and give you some legal advice on that, but we understand that that is one of the concerns you'd like addressed in Title 18.
Right. Thank you.
Ultimately, this is an issue of, and I understand the concern though, but ultimately this is an issue of two private entities, individuals or corporations or whatnot, and legally they have to go to court, right? And the winning party will take, has entitled to, court fees and whatnot, and repairs and all of this, and that's always been the process, and it's the process that is generalized across the board, across the nation. Now, what I hope that we can see, and I think you guys are hoping to see as well, is clarity on the process to educate some of those neighbors on what opportunities they have and what recourses they could have. But ultimately the city doesn't have much to say on this, and we don't want to get involved too much into damages that an individual is doing to another individual.
So,
It's civil, right?
Yes, ish. The problem is that we do have some ordinances that arguably, like right now, would be relevant to this. It may not have addressed the specific circumstances that happened in my district, but that's part of the problem, is that there seems to be some disagreement about even what our role is. What Katie's saying is correct, but we also have these ordinances that purportedly have already said that the city can do this or that. And so that's why the clarity is so needed, because in the case of one of the situations that I'm talking about, not all three, but one of them, we've been having this discussion for 3 years. So, and I just think that that's not, to whatever we can do to clarify the law, whether it's consolidating what we're saying the city can and can't do, whether it's drawing clear boundaries, whether it's saying there are things that we can do or things that we can do better, we really need that clarity. And it's taken a really long time, and I think that's demonstrative of the fact that what we have right now isn't adequate.
I guess one thing that I would like to let the attorney's office know as you do this research is I appreciate that the attorney's office's role is to protect the city from liability, and that's your literal job. I think in this case, what I'm hearing from other council members, and I'm putting words into your mouth, so correct it if they're wrong, is that we might not want to land at the least amount of involvement from the city in these cases. We may actually, as a city that serves our residents and does things because we want to help them, we may actually want to take a few steps further into more involvement in this case than the minimal amount of involvement that we're legally required to do. Is that fair to say? So we may want to get more involved than we have to just to help out the residents that can't help themselves in this case. And I would support that, being a little bit more involved in that. So
Thank you.
I don't think I don't think at least our request is what is the least we can do. It's what would be appropriate for us to do in this situation.
Absolutely. We can provide options.
I'm going to try to make a straw poll.
Thanks.
So my straw poll is that we would enact the affordable housing incentives, this at an upcoming meeting before the end of the year. The implementation date of and the effective date of that process of people initiating petitions under that process would be delayed until April 30th, 2024. And the reason for that delay is that in the intervening time that we hope to have an ordinance to the city council office that's gone through all of the administrative process on that end of the hallway that makes changes, corrections, and possibly additions to our section of the building code and city ordinance related to construction that impacts adjacent property owners.
Okay, that's clear
Good
to me.
enough?
Any questions from other council members on? All right, let's call the question. That is 6. And Councilman Peacher, are you with us? It looks like not. So 6-0 supporting Councilman Wharton's straw poll. Thank you, Councilman Wharton.
Good job.
I'm gonna
Going
try something. It's probably not going to work. I also think that delayed implementation date can be helpful for some of the enforcement mechanisms. So I'm going to try. I would propose a straw poll that in addition to the changes to Title 18, that we ask that by that April 30th date, we have a outline from the administration about how they will enforce the affordability pieces and what metrics that they will track and report to us for this ordinance. So I'm saying we don't know exactly what that's going to be today or how that's going to work, but we know that it's something we need to work on. So that's the second piece that we'd ask them to bring to us by April 30th.
Does that include
Yes.
perhaps like new staff?
New staff,
staffing?
new funding, whether we contract with an outside agent, whether we have a partnership with the housing authority to do the income qualification, how that all works, but functionally how that works. Nick Norris looks like he
Can I
has something to
comment
say.
on some of that? Some of that we're not going to be able to know until we actually start implementing the ordinance. So we won't be able to have an outline of all of that information by then.
Okay. That's fair, because you don't know what it's going to look like until it comes to us. But there is some, is there some that we could get by then?
What if we change it to, instead of like the full plan, a framework?
Yeah.
Because I think that it's that framework piece related to this is how we foresee it, taking shape, that I'm interested as a council member in giving feedback to. Is that possible?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it just, there's always going to be some unknowns. So as long as we have the flexibility on what that entails, I mean, we can tell you how we intend to do something, but oftentimes we don't know if that's actually going to play out until we actually have to put it to work. And so, I guess if it's a framework, we'll do the best we can.
Well, and I think as a council, we can commit to having space on the agenda to be able to talk about these things as well. I know we're going to choose a new chair in a couple meetings, but this is as much on us to make sure we're creating space for those conversations. So I think,
I just want to,
Councilor Dugan.
I think that's great that we are open to doing that, but I think, are we open to, what if there's some other changes over the next 5 months that we look at and we find other additional information that we want to change, or the incentive or other portions of this ordinance, we're looking to pass the ordinance now, but only look at some small sections of it in the next 6 months. I can see passing this and then saying, how about we still have this time that we want to adjust until that April 30th? 'Cause you're already, right now, you're just saying, hey, we're going to pass it, but we can adjust sections C and D for enforcement and, or whatever section for enforcement only over the next 5 months. Is that what you're asking about?
No, I'm not clear on that.
You're not wanting to change the ordinance in any way. You just want to get some clarification on the enforcement.
The enforcement is not in the ordinance. The ordinance is what you're allowed to build. The enforcement is our process to make sure that
It's written
what
in
we've
the
allowed
yes.
them to build is.
But the enforcement
actually-
is part of the in the ordinance.
Well, I
It's
think
written.
it's
It
more.
talks about how these
I
things are.
think it also includes things like how does a property owner of a 4-unit
Right.
development actually learn how to do income qualification to make sure that their tenants are qualified to live in an 80% AMI unit, right? Like that's not in our ordinance. That's something that we probably have to either help that landlord with or find a partner that can do that. So I guess I'm not thinking that there's anything in the ordinance that needs to change. It's things outside of the ordinance. I think the ordinance includes what the ordinance can as a land use zoning ordinance. There are other things outside of that.
So your idea is not to change anything in the ordinance as it's written over the next 5 months, just making sure that the Title 18 is
No, that's one. Title 18 is one thing that we've already
Right.
discussed. This is separate so that we can
Right.
figure out a system that, like, how do we actually know that the percentage of units that we have said are going to be
Right.
rented out? Because we don't have a LIHTC funding bank that's going to do that 15-year monitoring for us. We're going to have to figure out a way that happens. So it's
But
how does
none
that
of
happen?
your idea is that none of these is going to change in that ordinance until over the next 6 months or whatever time frame.
Well, we said that until April 30th,
Right.
the ordinance isn't even enacted.
Right.
So nothing changes in that time period, and that gives us the time to both change Title 18, but also come up with the enforcement and monitoring mechanisms that we've been asking for.
But we would approve it sooner than the April 30th date. We wouldn't wait. Would we wait until the April 30th date to approve the ordinance? Or
No.
okay,
No.
okay.
I think let me
And I just want to go ahead.
restate so I understand it
Yeah.
as well. But basically, what you're suggesting, Council Chair Mano, is to ask the administration by that date, April 30th, to give us some sort of framework, to use the words of Councilmember Young, a framework on how we are going to enforce and how we're going to ask for the reporting. So processes on how internally the administration is going to manage this new ordinance, since it's a very new thing for us. So trying to come up with the process. So that's the only thing, that's what you're asking.
To the extent possible, understanding that
Okay.
to what Nick Norris said, there may be some things that are impossible to give us by then, but to the extent possible, come up with a plan.
And I support that.
And can I just clarify, there will be no provision in here that would prevent this from going into effect if the changes to Title 18 and or this framework is not sent to the council yet. It would
That's my
go
understanding
in
of the
effect
straw
on
poll.
April 30th,
Yes.
period. Okay. Just
That's my understanding of what I voted on in the straw poll.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what I said. That's what I meant.
Thanks for clarifying. So the straw poll on the table is just to add that we're going to also, in that time period, focus on enforcement, reporting, and a framework for how this happens. Is there any more discussion to that? Any questions from the administration? I noted that some of the answers may be impossible by then, but that we're just going to focus on that as much as possible. Okay, let's call the question. Councilmember Petro, are you with us? Still no? Okay, so 6-0 with Councilmember Petro absent. We were just handed a piece of paper with one staff suggestion of specific language to actually change in the ordinance. Can someone walk us through this?
Sure, that was one recommendation that we had. It has an excerpt of a highlighted section that we were proposing to remove. Right now, it does limit the incentives. And since we've drafted the incentives, we are seeing some larger projects, and so we don't want to limit those, and particularly the projects that we're seeing coming in with income averaging, where they're able to have units that are up to 80% AMI, and then also have those deeply affordable units.
Yeah, I have a question on this. I actually didn't read this when I went, or recognize this when I read through the ordinance. Does this mean that like a 100% affordable project couldn't qualify for the incentives if it's over 125 units?
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree with your recommendation then to take that out because, yeah, I think that makes sense then. Council members, questions on that? Thanks for catching that. That's okay. So then I guess I'll just propose a straw poll that we go a staff recommendation to remove letter E from whatever section this is. Okay. That's 6-0, yes. Are there any other things that we need to, that council members feel are unresolved about this ordinance? Thank you so much for your help, both to my council colleagues, to staff, the council staff, and the planning staff. This has been a big lift and a lot of work, but I'm really proud that we're hopefully here now. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we need a break? Or are we good?
I need a break.
A short break? Okay. Yeah. Let's do a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back to item number 3, which is an ordinance for a rezone and master plan at 711 and 721 South 12th East. So we'll be... Oh. All right. Salt Lake City, we are back from break. We are on item 3 of our work session's agenda, which is an ordinance for a rezone and master plan amendment at 711 and 721 South 1200 East. I'm excited for this petition. Thank you for being here. Brian Fulmer from council staff will introduce the item, and then Wayne Mills will from planning will give us more information, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the zoning map for the properties you mentioned from their current R2 or single and two-family residential zoning to I or institutional. In addition, the proposal calls for amending the Central Community Master Plan future land use designations from low-density residential to institutional. The proposed amendments would allow expansion of the McGillis School campus for classes, meetings, assemblies, and administration. And with that, I will turn it over to Wayne.
Thank you. The presentation doesn't pop up here, so I apologize. We're going to be.
It's on those little screens. Oh, is it not?
It's not.
We see a slide that says Douglas Ward General Plan and Zoning Map Amendments.
Okay. Well, we'll keep rolling through while Cindy Lou here works on. No, it's not working there either. So next slide, please. I'm gonna look over your shoulder. As Brian mentioned, this is a proposal to rezone those two particular pieces of property. The McGillis School, which is located around the corner, and I apologize, I can't see the screen, so I don't have all the addresses. Oh,
yeah, can we
you're
turn
fine.
that? I don't know if it's turnable. The addresses are 688 South 13th East.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
So the plan is to reuse the existing church site, the Douglas Ward, at 711 and 721 South 12th East to expand the school, and a rezone is allowed to is necessary to do that. Next slide, please. This gives a little overview of the location. You'll see the McGillis School in the corner of 13th East and 7th South, and then the subject property right around the corner. Next slide. So the existing property, or the property is, the existing zoning is R2, single and two-family zoning, and schools are not permitted in that zone. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the property to institutional. It's the I zone. And there, as you can see in that map, there's a couple of other institutional zoning districts around, including the existing McGillis School property. Next slide, please. Property is located in the Central Community Master Plan area. Currently, the future land use map designates the property as low-density residential. In order to make the future land use map and the master plan consistent with the proposed zoning, the proposed amendment is to change that future land use map designation to institutional. Next slide, please. So just a quick little summary about the differences between the institutional and R2 zones. The R2 zoning district is a predominantly residential district that mainly just allows single and two-family land uses, that's single family and duplexes. The institutional district is, as the name implies, an institutional type zone. It allows schools, medical facilities, offices. Does allow some residential land uses, but they're more of the like assisted living, social service type uses. One concern is oftentimes is building height and what's allowed in the zones. Although this proposal is to reuse the existing building, but just to give an overview of what the zoning would allow if it were ever to be redeveloped. The R2 zone allows building heights up to 28 feet. The institutional zone allows building heights up to 35 feet by right. Can go between 35 and 75 feet, but that does require design review approval by the Planning Commission. There's also some special provisions with that, in that for every foot of building height, an additional setback is required of a foot. So really the bottom line with the two zones is the R2 is really a typical low-density residential zoning district. Institutional zone allows higher intensity of development, basically just uses that cater to more people and are located in bigger, taller buildings. Next slide. I think that's it. Next slide. Yeah, and that's it. And the applicant is here, and they have their own presentation too.
Wayne, is a church allowed in an R2 zone, or is this a legal non-conforming use?
Churches are allowed as a conditional use. Yes.
Okay, but schools are not allowed at all.
Correct.
Got it. All right. Council members, questions for staff before we ask if the applicant would like to address this? All right. As the applicant, you get 5 minutes, so go ahead and do you have a presentation or?
I do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to the council, and thank you very much for your time on your agenda this afternoon. We greatly appreciate it. My name is Jim Brewer, and I'm the head of the McGillis School. This is my 7th year as head of school. Next slide, please. McGillis is a K-8 private school that is rooted in Jewish culture and values and is open to all students. We have just under 400 students, 395 students today, and our mission is to instill in our students a love of learning and the ability to think critically, live ethically, and appreciate the value of each individual. Next slide, please. We have sustained this enrollment of between 390 and 400 students over the past 5 years. We are in our 34th year as a school and our 21st year in the former Douglas Elementary School. The school purchased the Douglas Elementary School in 2002, and we opened in 2003 to students at that time to a completely renovated and retrofitted school building. Next slide, please. We are once again today in need of more educational space. We did expand our facility in 2010, and we are once again feeling full with nearly 400 students. We do seek to acquire the Douglas Ward building to allow us to expand our programming offered at our school. We're in our 2nd year of operating classes inside the modular classroom building that you see in this slide here. And we are in this building in part due to an innovative and new program that's part of our school. We started a 3rd division of our school that's now in its 4th year called the Learning Center, or the TLC. And it is a school within a school supporting students with language-based learning differences such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. It's a one-of-a-kind program that does not exist anywhere else in the state of Utah, and we're quite proud of opening this up. The enrollment has grown tremendously. We started with 8 students in year 1. We ended with 11 in year 1. We grew to 24 in year 2, 30 in year 3, and now in year 4 with 36 students. We see this opportunity to acquire the Douglas Ward as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The densely populated residential neighborhood with mixed housing near an urban center and the ability to acquire new space in that is so close to proximity to our campus and is essentially move-in ready for educational purposes is something that does not present itself often. And so this is really an opportunity that we see as a dream for a school whose educational programming and needs can be met with this additional space. Next slide, please. We have a history of using this ward. When our school constructed our addition in 2010, we walked students back and forth to use the Douglas Ward building and facility for physical education classes, as there's a gym in the building. And so for a full year, we walked students back and forth from our main campus to this Douglas Ward campus. And we have a relationship with them. We have a relationship with the neighborhood, and we've been great stewards of our neighbors now for 20 plus years. Next slide, please. We feel that our track record is a good one in just preserving really beautiful, wonderful spaces. We restored the beautiful Douglas Elementary School that was built in 1916. We added a very aesthetically pleasing and near identical addition to this school in 2010. We host our East Community Council neighborhood meetings at the school. We rake our neighbors' leaves every November and our fall leaf haul annually. We allow our neighbors to come and use our playground and to use our spaces outside of school hours and to bring their dogs as well. We really try hard to be a good neighbor, and we believe that we have very good neighbors, and there's mutual respect between us. Next slide, please. We've been in this process for now just over 2 years. We really have hoped to have this opportunity for a long time now to acquire the Ward building. And we have twice bid on the property, and we've twice lost to other bidders. And although we presented our case before it went to market in hopes that we might be able to acquire the facility without it going to market, it indeed went to market. And we lost to a higher bidder. That deal fell through. We were asked to apply once again and submit a best and final offer. We did so again. Months later, we found out that that deal fell through as well. And then we were approached directly to acquire of our interest at the time to purchase, and we are now under a purchase agreement. We hope that this third time is a charm for us as a school, and we hope it's a third time is the charm for our neighborhood as well, as we know that they support this acquisition. Next slide, please. This property has been used as an LDS ward for 70 years, and it's been vacant for the past 2 years. It has done so under R2 zoning. We're applying for the institutional zoning, and we do not need any exceptions to that zoning. We will live within the boundaries of institutional zoning. It is our intention to maintain the integrity of this building and to have a low impact and a positive influence on our Douglas neighbors. We plan for light building modifications. There are things that we need to do to occupy as a school. That's already included the removal of the steeple, which has been done by the church. And our goal is to maintain the integrity of this facility and to prepare with very minimal renovations in hopes that we can start in the 24-25 school year in the facility. So we'll plan for some light construction in the interior so that we can occupy. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the presentation. And thank you for the trees you planted in Jefferson Park. I think that is evidence of you are a good community partner, so appreciate that. Councilmember Young?
So in terms of the use case, I know you talked about that school within a school being an opportunity there. Do you see, I'm trying to just figure out the number of students that you would expect to see in that space and whether or not you would use it for like full school community gatherings, what your plans were.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have nearly 80,000 square feet on our existing campus. So in terms of like large school events, that will take place on our McGillis campus. We just need space. We have that modular classroom and we really want to feel like our TLC and all of our students are included in our building. So we could see it being a flexible use space for us to use throughout the day and not using it in any way where there's drop off or pick up facility at the end of the day. So we would keep that on our main campus, but to be able to expand program and just extend that. We're also not interested in growing enrollment tremendously. We like our size of around 400 students. It suits us well. We're just bursting at the seams, and it gives us some of that flex space to do the type of innovative learning that we like to do in our school. It gives us the flexible space to do so. So having students or classes down there at a time during parts of the day would seem to be the best fit for us at this moment.
Excellent. So you answered my question related to the drop-off and pickup component in terms of limiting impact to the local neighbors, and I appreciate that planning.
Yeah.
I think it's been, a couple of years now trying to get this property. I'm so excited. I think I haven't had any constituent tell me that they were opposed to this. I think in any case, I've gotten so many letters of support. So I'm excited that, if we can make this happen and keep another, older building in our stock in that older neighborhood, it would be great. And I mean, the services that you're going to provide sounds amazing to me. Children with dyslexia and other issues, what a great service for them. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not often that residents, just run-of-the-mill residents, are the first people to tell us about a rezone unless they're really opposed to it. So this was unique for me as well to get random people coming up and saying, will you support this thing? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but the community has known about this for a long time and has approached me with asking for my support for this, and everything I can see I'm excited about, so appreciate that. All right, I think that's all. Thanks for being here. You will be, our tentative agenda is public hearing tonight on this item and tentative action on December 5th.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
You're setting the date tonight during the consent.
Oh, setting the date.
And
public hearing and action on the 5th. Thanks.
Yeah, potential action both on the 5th.
And
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank you, a special thank you to you and Vice Chair Petro and to the McGillis School for requesting that we move a little bit faster because of the purchase agreement that it's in place that has to be completed by December 9th or so. So I really appreciate you guys helping my district with this project. Thank you.
We're very grateful for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are getting a little behind on time, so we'll hopefully go through the next items somewhat quickly. Fingers crossed. Item number 4 is local nonprofit direct assistant grant awards follow-up. Ben Ludke, Tony Milner, Heather Royale, and Jack Markham are here to discuss this item. And if you'll remember, council members, we've had a briefing about this before. This is the item where I think we basically asked the administration to help us spread the peanut butter thinner, and this is the follow-up discussion to that. Yeah, peanut butter is money. Go ahead, Ben.
As you said, this is a follow-up briefing, and we have an updated funding log. There is also a handout. It should be at all of your seats. If not, it is on the ledge right in front of you. The other handout we just received earlier today, you will notice on the front page in the middle at the top of attachment 1, $200,000 shaded in green. That is because 2 applications have been withdrawn, which frees up $200,000. If you turn the page to 2, you'll see in red font withdrawn for application number 6. This was the United Way Bennion Elementary School. And at the top of page 3 is number 11, the Road Home Access to Health Services. That was also withdrawn. The Road Home received separate funding from the state for this same full-time employee. That's why they withdrew. And the United Way said that their contractual relationship with Bennion changed, and so they withdrew that application. So $200,000 currently freed up. The other handout, which I mentioned we received today, this is the mayor's suggestion for how to use the $200,000 that was freed up. And if anyone in the audience needs copies, on the podium behind me, there are extra copies available. In the staff report, there is table 1, which is potential funding to be freed up. That is, which applications should funding be reduced? And then there are 3 scenarios later in the staff report about how to use those funds. And the 3 scenarios have 3 different policy approaches, which the council briefly touched on at the last briefing. So you could consider the mayor's scenario a 4th scenario. So on the screen, we have table 1, and this is just an option I'll walk through quickly. So the council was interested in shifting funding away from organizations that have multiple applications recommended to receive funding. So we have First Step House. They have application number 3 and 4. You see in the middle column the recommended funding, and then the red amounts are the potential change. So a reduction of $11,000, and then underneath that, a reduction of $17,908. Moving down, the Children's Center, it's listed as TBD. So the amounts for First Step House came from feedback from the applicant. They said we could have a reduced amount, the $11,000 less, the $17,000 less, and still be able to implement the program as proposed. For the Children's Center of Utah, it's TBD because the program is readily scalable. So you could leave it as is, or you could reduce it by, say, $100 or $1,000 increments if you want additional funding to shift. Moving down to the United Way, number 5, they said they could have $20,000 less and still be able to implement the program. On the next page, the United Way withdrew application 6, Bennion Elementary, so that frees up $100,000. And they also had a third application, number 8, which could be reduced by $20,000 as well. The Road Home, they withdrew application number 11, frees up $100,000, so they would only have 1 application left, which is why this does not show a reduction to number 12. And the last organization that had multiple applications recommended is the Asian Association of Utah. And they said that they could have a lower amount, $32,000 lower. So if all of these reductions were taken together, you can see the total of $301,000 would be freed up. And then the 3 scenarios later in the staff report allocate the $301,000 to other applications. But before we get into those, it might be worth discussing, is Table 1 what the council's comfortable with? Do you not support some of these? Which revenue do you want to shift is the question.
So just so I'm clear, the 200,000 we have to use regardless because the applicant withdrew. It's whether we want to go from 200,000 to 301,540 by reducing these additional ones.
Yep.
And the applicants have all been, those changes have been acceptable. The additional $101,000 has been acceptable to those applicants.
So the housing stability staff went and spoke to each of the applicants. They heard back from almost all of them. Yes.
Okay, and then can you remind us which applications we had flagged that we would like to find funding for? Is it just these 4 on the mayor's recommended?
No. So can we go to scenario 2? So scenario 2, these are the applications that the council identified as of interest for shifting funding. NeighborWorks number 24 was just past the cutoff of where the advisory board's recommendations ran out of funding. And then the council had also looked at the in-between, number 28, Alliance House, number 32, and Fit to Recover, number 38.
Okay, and then the mayor's proposal is we overlap on the in-between, but not the other 3.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. I guess my, well, any councilors want to jump in with thoughts on this?
In scenario 3, we're just spreading the peanut butter a little bit more across programs there. And they, back to same type of question, those organizations would be fine with that change, like NeighborWorks, which of course wasn't funded. Now we're just looking at 50 grand. I think they would be acceptable with that.
NeighborWorks, correct me if there was an update today. I think they were the one application or organization that did not get back to staff.
Okay. But the Guadalupe, the Family Support, Swazo Business, in between, all were appreciative of that and could use those fundings if you were to go with scenario 3.
Correct. So scenario 3, it would not be fully funding any of the applications.
Right.
They would all be partially funded. And there are several of the applications where they said they could use any amount. And there were a couple, including Fit to Recover, where they said we would need this minimum amount. For them, it was $38,700 in order to implement the program.
Right. And I'm trying to look at scenario 3 is not quite what the mayor has and what our scenario 2 is. It seems like there's some overlap.
I think the biggest difference between the mayor's recommendation and scenario 3 is sticking with the 200,000 or wanting to go up to the higher $301,000. Right. That's probably the biggest difference. A secondary difference is the mayor's is recommending the maximum amount, whereas scenario 3, nobody gets the maximum amount.
Right.
But that's because it would be for the policy of spreading the peanut butter as far as it can go.
Okay, but the other difference is the mayor's recommendation includes Boys and Girls Club of Great Salt Lake and First Step House, and scenario 3 does not include those.
That's true.
True. Okay.
But the First Step House does have money in it in the original one. In the original
in
one.
the other ones, that's correct. Yeah.
Because First Step House does get funding for the first one.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could we? I mean, maybe for my brain, could we narrow down? Do we want to spread the peanut butter or not first, knowing that we have $200,000 that became, if you wish, available to be. If we answer that first question first, then we can decide how we want to use the money. Do we want to, do we want to do that? Do we want to reduce some of the, recommended awards to have more money and to have 300,000 something, 301,540, or we just want to have $200,000 and stick with the recommended and then find out what we do with the 200? So I guess the first question is,
okay,
what do we want to do on the about that first?
Spread the peanut butter. Spread it.
So Councilmember Valdemoros is proposing that we do reduce those identified applications, so we have 301,000. Is that your straw poll?
I will, I'm okay with both of them, but we do have $200,000 more now that we could potentially do almost the same, and more so because we have, how we were cutting the money before or reducing the recommended budget didn't create $200,000. So I will say that we stick to the plan. We support the intended money, the recommended funding levels, and then we allocate the $200,000 as we wish.
Okay,
that would be what I would be.
Okay, so there are two opposing straw polls. One is to reduce the applications. We have $301,000, and one is to not reduce those and use only $200,000. So I'll just call the first one that was proposed, which is Councilmember Valdemoros, to reduce the applications and actually use $301,000.
So just to clarify on that one, basically you're looking at scenario 3, is Councilmember Valdemoros.
It's not. I think the straw poll that I heard was not that we are going to fund those, but that we were going to take that amount of money.
Okay.
And then we will need a second straw poll to decide if we're going to fund these specific ones or adjust that.
Yeah, I think I want us to separate the two things first because we get on the weeds. Do we want to have 300,000 or do we want to have 200,000?
Okay.
Yeah.
Originally we had 100,000 or so. So now we have more.
So the thumbs up on this straw poll is that we will use 301,000 and we'll reduce the ones that Ben identified.
Right.
Is everyone clear on that?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
And I just wanted to make a point. I think just by the conversation we had with a few of those applicants that were amenable to still be able to support their programs with less funds, I'm in support of spreading it.
Maybe you already covered this, and I was looking, but how did we come up with 101,554?
We suggested in the last meeting to do some cutting.
So this was
right. But I don't remember what.
It's in table 1
okay.
of the staff report.
Oh,
it would
great.
take
Okay.
all of the red changes.
Got it.
Of
Thank you.
which $200,000 are because the application was drawn, and 101,000 is because we would take money from those applications.
Got it.
With the not blessing, but with the understanding that those programs can still function. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I got the 200,000 part, but I forgot how we got the
Extra
balance of
101.
it. Yeah.
Okay, is everyone clear on the straw poll? Okay, let's call the question. That's 5 yes and 1 no. So we would like to do the adjustments in table 1.
We have more money. So we have 300,000.
So we have $301,000
Let's
to
decide how we're going to spend it.
use. I am okay with just going with scenario 3. I would be supportive of that. I'm also okay with making some adjustments so more of the mayor's recommendations are included. But the ones that are not on the mayor's list that I would really like to include are, well, there's just one, the Alliance House is a high priority for me that I would like to, I'm okay with going exactly with scenario 3 or going with the mayor's recommendation if we use the additional $101,000, at least some of that for the Alliance House. But if other
that would also
council,
include the Guadalupe transportation program as well.
what's that, Tony?
That would also include the Guadalupe
So, scenario
yeah.
3 it has all of those: Guadalupe and an Alliance House.
Yep.
Yes, but it does not have Boys and Girls Club and First Step House,
Okay.
which the mayor has recommended for use of the 200,000. But the First Step House is also included in another one.
Yeah.
The already recommended budget, they're adding more budget to that. So I think, if we did the Guadalupe in between, and we kept First Step House and Boys and Girls Club to the recommended budget, no change there. So we keep First Step to 60.
Oh, because Boys and Girls Club also got money in different applications.
Yes, and their
Okay.
amount was slightly less because they were on the cutoff line, so they were awarded less just because we ran out of dollars. So that mayor's recommendation was to increase it to Boys and Girls Club's recommended amount.
I see. Okay. Well, with that understanding, then I would.
Yeah, maybe I was.
Okay, go ahead.
clarify. So everything that's on the mayor's recommended has funding. They were just going to give additional funding, whereas scenario 3 has some programs that were not funded but now will be funded. Wrong?
Is that true? I think that In Between and Guadalupe were not recommended
That's-
originally,
Okay, but
and
the Boys
are.
But the Boys and Girls Club and the First Step were.
Is that true? Okay.
I mean, scenario 3 accomplishes both goals.
Yep, it sounds like it does.
Meets everybody. The only difference is the First Step and First Step House and Boys and Girls Club get the recommended budget, not the additional.
Okay.
That's the only difference.
All right.
So
With
scenario
that.
3, are we okay with scenario 3?
Yes, I am. Okay, scenario 3. Yes. Yay.
All right.
Good job. Thanks, staff. Both housing
Two other
stability.
items, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Um,
I'm so excited.
I will send out an updated version of this, rounding the awards to the nearest $100, since that is the best practice from finance that we're using going forward. And does the council want to provide a contingency in case, for whatever reason, an applicant is unable to use the funds? If that situation occurs, we could come back to the council, or you could provide direction now to say, if there's any funding unused, it should go to fill in the blank. And you could say the application that scored the next highest, or you could say this specific application. You don't have to decide, but just thinking of that potential situation.
How much money it is.
Yeah.
I think if it's over, let's say, because usually 50 is like the minimum. So I think if it's under 50, we should say divide it a certain way. If it's over 50, come back to us.
So I would propose if it's under 50,000, then give it to already funded applications that have demonstrated that they can use the funds effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Any of the ones that didn't receive full funding recommendations, I would say divide it among them. And assuming that they can still use it, divide it among them proportionally.
If
to
there's
what they
more than
received.
50,000, you would like.
If it's more than 50,000, come back and
Back to
we'll,
us.
we'll figure it out.
I'm okay with that.
Just for some clarification, would you want that funds divided evenly between all of the recommended, or just highest scored down the list?
I would say proportionate to what they received.
So what does that mean?
So like if they were severely, like if we cut funds for them, wait, hold on.
You know, that would be really complicated. I would just evenly divide it.
What?
It's only 50 grand, so I would just evenly divide it.
Yeah, okay, even.
Evenly divided
Great.
to any applicant that says they can actually use the funds.
Yeah.
Or did not
If
receive
their program's not scalable, then they don't get additional funding. If their program is scalable, divide it amongst those.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes, that's what I was trying to get
Okay.
to, but yeah, that makes sense.
And we'll add this contingency to the motion sheet, so it's in writing and in the public record.
Thank you. All right. Let's go to the next item, which is similar. This is the Local Business Direct Assistance ARPA Grant Awards follow-up discussion. Ben is also here.
We have a new set of handouts. Again, if anybody needs a copy, we have extras on the podium behind me. So this briefing is about the final phase of the $2 million that was appropriated from ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, funds for local business assistance grants. The council previously approved $1 million back in March, and then $500,000 last month. The remaining funds are $481,400. There is an attachment 1. That is the funding log showing the 15 applicants recommended to receive the funding. Note that 11 of the 15 had applied during the first phase. And then attachment 3 is the list of all 94 applications that were reviewed by the advisory committee. They're ordered from highest to lowest score. And as you go down the green highlighted column, you'll notice that there's one application that jumps, that is separated from the rest. This is because the advisory committee interpreted geographic equity, which was one of the requirements in the ordinance, as being at least one applicant per council district. So the H2 Blow Salt Lake City application has $8,800 recommended. This was the only application that scored highest from District 6. So the 6 applications that scored higher are not recommended for funding, so that District 6 does receive at least one application with funding. As was done in the previous phases, the committee is recommending a sliding scale approach to try and spread the funding further. They took the average score and multiplied it as a percentage to the eligible funding. So for example, if the average score was 95, the recommended funding would be 95% of the eligible amount requested. The council has final decision-making authority over the grant awards. This includes the dollar amounts and the uses. Similar to the last briefing, you may want to consider a contingency in case any of the funds are unable to be used. I'll end it there because I know Economic Development has a presentation and I think we have it ready to display.
Wonderful to be here with you this afternoon. We are here to present and request your final approval of our ARPA business grants. We thank you, council members, and the administration for the support of our work. As a department, we also express our gratitude to the Community Recovery Committee for their hard work in reviewing all the applications and making a final recommendation to council for approval. These grants are intended to continue supporting our local businesses to ensure their recovery takes place after a worldwide pandemic. We have used the ARPA grants as they were intended by Congress. ARPA funds and resources should be used to support and uplift the wellness needs of communities who have experienced historic disinvestment and been impacted most by the pandemic. As you will see today, the Salt Lake City ARPA Grants Program focus has been to support local businesses who were impacted the most by the pandemic. You will see a list of recipients that you're reviewing today include businesses from all the districts and even compelling number of businesses from District 1 and District 2. Thank you for the opportunity to be before you and to present the list of recipients. With that, Todd, you want to go ahead and run the presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Lorena. My name is Todd Anderson. I'm the Economic Development Project Coordinator, and I just have a short presentation I'll run through today. So today we're before council to talk about the Community Recovery Committee recommendation for the distribution of Phase 2 funds. Next slide, please. Our request today is to approve the Community Recovery Committee's recommended list of 15 applicants to receive the remaining funding out of the $2 million allocation. That remaining funding adds up to $481,400. Next slide, please. So in Phase 2, the Department of Economic Development created a program that allowed both new applicants and also unsuccessful applicants from phase 1 to apply in phase 2. We allowed both artists and home-based businesses to apply. We allowed small businesses to be reviewed anonymously to help with fairness and equity in the applications that were submitted. And we also provided technical assistance for all applicants. What that means is that city staff, DED staff, were able to have one-on-one meetings, email correspondence, calls, in order to help applicants through the application process if they needed that. Next slide, please. So the applicants, there were 94 eligible small business applications that were reviewed by the Community Recovery Committee. Next slide, please. Now I want to highlight the success of having a phase 2 for the grant program. We know that especially for historically marginalized communities, giving a second chance to apply for grants can increase fairness and equity. A second phase allowed for more equity communities to communities who needed technical assistance from city staff, needed longer lead times to get through the application process, or were unsuccessful in the first round. This increase in equity can be seen in the phase 2 data shown on this slide. So as an example, in phase 2, the recommended awardees included more Westside businesses, women-owned businesses, and businesses that have not received any other COVID-19 assistance, such as PPP or EIDL loans. As note, 73% of the recommended awardees were reapplicants from phase 1. These applicants worked with me and also with Kathy Rigby and DED staff to receive technical assistance, help with their applications, and they received much higher scores in this phase, which can be seen in the high percent that were recommended funding. Next slide, please. So grant recommendations were completed by the Community Recovery Committee, which is comprised of individuals that serve on other city boards and commissions. And the committee completed the following. They were able to review and discuss all of the applications that were eligible and submitted. And similar to council, they could request clarification about certain applications or just the grant process in general. Another important thing was they discussed ways to improve fairness and equity, and I'll say the committee was very thorough and very concerned about how to make this the most fair and equitable program possible, and I think they achieved that. Next slide, please. So again, our request is to approve the committee's recommended list of 15 applicants to receive the remaining funding, which comes out to $481,400. Next slide. And we want to thank you for the time, and that's my presentation.
How many applicants applied twice and are not recommended for funding?
Sorry, repeat the question.
You said, okay, let me ask it an easier way to answer. You said how many applied again in the second round?
That was, let me double check. I believe it was 11 that applied in the first phase, but that now are recommended for funding.
I thought you said something like 70, but you said it quickly, so I wasn't sure.
73% of the awardees are reapplicants from phase 1.
73% of these awardees.
Correct.
I see. Okay. Are there any reapplicants that are not recommended for funding?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Council members. Councilmember Young? No.
I just want to say thank you. I appreciate that the last time we had a discussion that we gave feedback, and I at least personally see all of the feedback incorporated into what you've brought back. So I'm appreciative of you listening to those suggestions and coming back with this solution.
Mr. Chair, I know that we had opinions before, and I appreciate that you listened to those. And I one of the things I hope, maybe if we had to do it again, we had it more opinions. But something that I see from this process is that West Side businesses are, had a little more attention now, which I appreciate that. I appreciate how we increase on areas that we should have increased. So maybe this dual process allow us for that. And I know that we want this money to get to those businesses quick. So I appreciate the process. I personally don't want to interfere on the process at this point. Because I felt like we have done quite a bit of that, and we had, and I'm okay with how it is presented to us. I'm supportive of this process, and thank you. And again, if we had to do it again, and I hope we don't, right? Because I hope we don't have a global pandemic. But if we had to do it again, maybe we have some lessons learned from this. But thank you, first of all.
And also, thank you for the opportunity for us to come back and show you and respond to your questions.
Thank you. I'm good with this as well. I want to move forward. Thank you so much.
Okay. I think we're going to move on to the next item then. Item number
Mr. Chair?
6. Yeah.
Would you like to use the same contingency direction that you did in the last briefing to evenly divide if it's less than $50,000?
Sure.
And then if it's more, we'll come back. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Item number 6 is an informational UTA budget presentation. And we have Jay Foz and Carlton Christensen here.
While everyone's getting situated here, thank you for the invitation, Mr. Chair, and letting us to come here. I had to ask Cindy if I'd ever been here in this room before, and she reminded me we had. And then I looked back, and I remember I'm probably the only one around when Brigham Young posed for that picture in the back. So, but certainly on behalf of the Utah Transit Authority, we appreciate the opportunity to present our tentative budget for 2024. We operate on a calendar year, so we're in the public solicitation process of getting comments and feedback on our budget. And as we've looked to meet the growing needs of transit, we certainly are grateful to the commitment that the city has made toward extra transit within Salt Lake City, and consider you great partners and a great example, frankly, to others. And so we'll go through the budget and give you some highlights to it, and then certainly respond to whatever questions you would like to ask.
Why don't we introduce ourselves? So I'm Jay Fox. I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Transit Authority.
I'm Viola Miller, Chief Financial Officer.
Brad Armstrong, I'm the Director of Budget and Financial Strategy at UTA.
And we'll just take you through the budget. I believe we had sent over a draft budget. These are essentially highlights, but if you have any questions to dig in, we'll be happy to do that. We also have Russ Fox, who is here, he's Director of Planning. So if you have any service-related questions, we have him available to answer those as well. If we can go to the next slide. So just an overview of our operating budget in terms of Salt Lake City highlights. Countywide, we have 934,000 hours of service. $6 million in our operating budget is from Salt Lake City funds, which goes to fund routes 1, 2, 9, and 21. I actually took route 2 today. A wonderful highlight that finished off the year and is actually continuing on to 2024 is our track service. That now includes Saturday service at 15 minutes, and that was added to the budget in 2024. The front-runner funds that are in our budget that would directly affect Salt Lake City are funds that we have dedicated towards the strategic double tracking program. That strategic double tracking project is being overseen and implemented by the Utah Department of Transportation, but we are supporting that, and we, the Utah Transit Authority, are now finishing up the environmental work on that project so that it can proceed hopefully to grant agreement and into construction. Our fastest growing service is our on-demand service. It is, I saw Carlton the other day, and I said to him that month over month, September, October, we were up 10% system-wide in our ridership for that program. And that's for 4 defined service areas. One of those is the west side of Salt Lake City. It's been not only very successful, but we have also been able to make adjustments to our on-demand application so that if there is an individual who has a better mode that will get them to their destination quicker, we actually are able to push them off of the on-demand. It takes a little bit of pressure off a service that has actually a very high demand. At the same time, that's actually reduced our missed or busy calls to less than 3%, which is a huge, huge improvement over the last year. And finally, 80% of our paratransit and flex service actually runs in Salt Lake City and continues to be funded under this budget. You go to the next slide. Some of the budget additions for this year, and these are often what are known as budget initiatives. I'll just highlight a couple of them. We're going to continue to fund our microtransit and continue to enhance that. So not only do we have funds that Salt Lake City is committed to the west side, we also are committing additional funds to South Salt Lake County. South Salt Lake County, unlike other service areas, primarily relies on our on-demand service. It replaced 5 flex routes, and during that time, that on-demand service has increased ridership in just a year period by over 300%. So it's been very effective, particularly in areas that have lower density. We have a safety initiative, which is offering a hepatitis B vaccination program for our team. I talked a little bit about the enhanced transit apps features. So not only are we enhanced our on-demand app, but our transit app as well. Transit app is the app that's used for the rest of our service, and that app, you can actually make your payment on that transit app now. It also will anticipate route deviations and actually incorporate that into your planning. So if we have had to deviate our route for any reason, that's now known very quickly to our users. We have put a lot of effort over this year into increasing our recruiting. We are in a much better position at the end of this year as we were in the beginning in terms of our labor shortage, particularly on the bus operator side. That runs its gamut from marketing to a successful collective bargaining agreement at the beginning of the year, recruitment events that we've had, a lot of effort into making the work conditions for our supervisors who support all those operators much better, particularly as we go into next year, putting a lot of effort into redesigning that supervisor responsibilities to offload a lot of their administrative work. We go to the next, and finally, we continue to fund for maintenance of our electric bus charging infrastructure, as well as increasing the amount of infrastructure we have as we plan for the future of our fleet and transitioning to more electric buses as well as CNG. We go to the next slide. Just briefly, and I don't have to go through this in detail, but when we're in the process of budgeting, we have a number of filters and lenses that we use. First, which is actually the second column, is our strategic priorities. We have a strategic plan that the board adopted at the beginning of this year with five separate pillars that define our strategic goals and objectives for the year. And each of our budget priorities are aligned to those, each of our budget initiatives are aligned to those priorities. In addition, service is an important part of our operating budget, if not the most important part. And so we see that through the lens of operating priorities. We have priority considerations that we have. So if there's any legal or political mandates, regulatory issues, some other impact to our programs of service, we'll prioritize in that way. And finally, we prioritize based on economic value back to our agency. It's reduce agency costs, make us more efficient, improve service delivery, and improve culture. If we go to the next slide. And here's a summary of our budget overview. Our 2023 budget was about 400, a little bit north of 409 million. We're now for 2024 at an anticipated budget of 424.5 million. Just to go through each of the columns in between those two. One-time expenses are programs that are literally one time for the year. So as we set our base budget, those are backed out. We add any additions, which would be items that were going to be part of the base budget going forward. Any adjustments that we have, the largest part of this adjustment is our personnel costs. And again, this year we had a new collective bargaining agreement, so that affected the base and increased the base. And then finally, any carry forwards, so those are projects that were, for whatever reason, not completed in 2023 that are moving forward. And then finally, we add to that the initiatives that I just went through with you, specific initiatives that hit one of those priorities that I previously identified. We go to the next budget. And this simply breaks out the operating budget by mode. And if one of the things that I like to point about this slide is if you look down the columns, we don't get to our administration until column number 8, or the columns, the pair columns number 8. So the operating budget by mode is is essentially for the most part either for our individual services, including microtransit now, as well as all the operating support for those services, and that's maintenance away, that's the maintenance of our facilities, maintenance of our system as a whole. We can go to the next slide. And then just we're adopting our capital budget at the same time, our 5-year capital plan. So if I can go through those, if we can go to the next slide. Our capital budget for 2024 is $230.4 million. That's part of a larger 5-year capital plan for the budget. You can see the revenue sources to your right. The lion's share of those, almost half, is UTA local dollars. Just a couple of projects to point out. We have a system that's starting to grow older. We have a lot of effort that's put into state of good repair. We try to do our state of good repair work that affects the communities as minimally as possible. For instance, we replaced our S-curve going up to the university for our tracks line over the summer to reduce it, and that literally was a very fast and rigorous project that we did that was done both during the day and at night. So one of those projects is our traction power substations, which is the first one you see there, and the components that go to them. We are also replacing our fare system. This is something that we were holding a little bit on last year during waiting to see what the governor's budget recommendation would be, whether it would be accepted by the legislature. Not having been done so, we need to replace our fare system, and so that's part of what we're doing right now. We had a very successful grant application for light rail replacement. We are going to be replacing ultimately all 40 of our Blue Line cars. These are the high board cars. It will do two things for us. It will give us a completely level boarding system for all of our rail. And more importantly, well, I should say equally important, it will reduce delays on that line, because right now, if somebody who has a disability needs to board one of our Blue Line cars, our operator has to get out of the cab, assist them in getting on board the train, and then proceeding. So that the time lost on that can actually be significant if that happens a few stops in a row. And because we are sharing our alignment downtown with two other light rail lines, that can create a lot of delays very quickly. So that will be a wonderful benefit of having the new light rail cars. We are working towards our Mid-Valley BRT and hope to have a grant agreement this year. This will be our new bus rapid transit. It'll be an east-west connection across the middle of Salt Lake County. And of course, at the same time that all that's happening, we're improving our light rail system and rehabbing both our cars and our alignment as well. If I can go to the next slide. And finally, just a breakout of the where the funds are for the capital expense summary. I will point out the large amount for infrastructure. It's about 20% of the total cost for our capital budget for this year, as well as replacing service vehicles and and our larger capital projects as a whole, which includes the Mid-Valley Connector, which I mentioned before. And I think that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Dugan.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Carlton. Appreciate the briefing on the budget. And as you all are aware, I'm very pro public transportation, and I want to keep seeing that grow. As a capital city and the largest city in the state that doubles every day in population, I still see a gap in our public transportation into some high areas. The VA hospital area, the university, I'll call it the hospital complex, and even just outskirts. It's not a high employment, but it's a high usage. It's a zoo. But we lack a lot of good public transportation up there on a regular basis. Foothill has a bus service that goes by Foothill every 30 minutes, but no one's going to be on that bus because it's every 30 minutes and the frequency is not there. But that area is growing. It's the second largest employer as far as area is concerned in the state. And I know this is really not for 2024. This is for the longer term, but I really want to look at that. I look at the east-west connection still needs a lot there. So to the airport, we've talked about this already, and it's amazing that we have one of the busiest airports in the United States, and we don't have any bus service out there. And it's a 24/7 operations. We need it for not just the passengers, but also the employees. And then, so I'm really pushing hard. I'm pushing hard on you, but also kind of pushing hard on us and maybe the league on how we get you that, how we find more revenue for that services. Because right now, 76% of your revenues from sales tax, that's volatile. And there are other streams that we can use because we can't say, oh, we don't see the demand now. Well, that's because I can't take the bus every 30 minutes. But if it was every 10 minutes, I'd be on the bus. And I think that's through the board. And then I have one other question, but if you could just kind of address that first.
Let me take a stab at it, and if others want to add to it, Councilmember Dugan. If you had asked me back in 2018 when I took this position, if I thought labor would be one of the largest constraining force to expanding any kind of service, I would have looked at you with a little bit of cross-eyed, because you could just, you could pretty much go out and hire whoever you needed to as long as it was a somewhat equitable wage. What we've learned over the last couple of years is that the shortage of labor, despite having a new collective bargaining agreement and making progress in that gap, but I don't think anybody from a large employment standpoint can look on the horizon and say there's going to be an abundance of labor out there to be had. And so we're thinking about that strategically. We're making some changes internally that would allow that growth to start to take place. And as we've made progress in our hiring this last year and certainly going forward, I know in our 5-year plan that we hope that there's some additional service anticipated, not only in some of the areas that you might have identified, but there are a number of routes, through Salt Lake City that warrant a more frequent service than we're able to do, and the demand is actually there. So it's that balance between it.
Yeah, I thank you for that, because I know that labor's been difficult for all of us. I mean, all our city budget too. We had the same kind of force. We had, our parks had to go from $13 to $7 so we could actually have some people cut the lawn there, and that's a big deal. And your revenue, 76% is coming from sales tax, which is also not really a stable platform. Right. And I'm looking at going, yes, if we could, even if I could switch on the light switch and say I got enough labor to do bus services for, let's say, a 10-minute head time or 15 minutes instead of 30, do you have the buses, and do you have, the other infrastructure to handle that? And what would that be, and how do we get that additional funds for UTA? Because when I look at your 5 pillars and I see the economic value pillar, I go, yeah, that's great, but I'd rather look at the environmental value and the health impact value to our residents, and not so much on the, because that broadly is also part of our collective costs there. And that's where I'm trying to push more, not so much UTA, but also more the state side of the house, is how do we get you guys the funding that our residents across the Wasatch Front deserve?
I mean, one of the things that in our sales tax assessment, we planned on basically a flat sales tax this last year in our own economic model, and probably flat in early 24. And, so to your point, although we certainly benefited in prior years from robust sales tax, the state has made and appears to want to make an ongoing commitment to the capital side of transit. And then I think on top of that, there is still yet to be an enacted local option sales tax through the counties. Utah County actually has enacted that tax, but we're still waiting on Salt Lake, Davis, Weber, and then, of course, Twiller, Box Elder counties, but often referred to as the fifth. That portion that went to transit got watered down a little bit, but Salt Lake County is 60% of our revenue, and so their eventual enacting, will then open up some doors for both service as well as operations.
Okay, and sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then Councilmember Young after you.
I thank you very much for also supporting and working with the city and the school foundation on the bus passes for the kids. I mean, all the time I'm getting great kudos for that. People love it. Kids, like Councilmember Petro's little 7th grader, he's going out on the buses with his buddies, and they're going to different places, and it's been remarkable. I think a remarkable success, and that's fairless for them. We're all kind of contributing to that. And when I look at not the slides you have, but the budget summary, it said 5.9% of the revenue is from passenger fares, and that must be what the U is paying for. Everyone's paying to go on in the buses. 5.9%. I'm just using the numbers from the thing. But if you were to, but there's an administrative cost to that, and so do we have a number of how much the administrative cost is to enact the fare structure? Because I'm just trying to figure out how much a fare box actually generates for the UTA.
We can probably take that across the board, but I mean, one of the things that we've actually just talked about today was we haven't done a fare study since 2020. One of the reasons that we didn't do one in 2022, because we do them every 2 years, was because we were coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. And so it was concerned. So we're actually looking at that. Our plan is to look at that this year with recommendations going to 2025. Unlike other cities, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, where they rely heavily on fares, and they've actually been greatly affected by the pandemic, particularly the move to a virtual environment, part-time for the most part, by the workforce. We haven't had to rely as much on that because we have a good tax revenue basis, and we also have a good amount of money that we get from our federal funding partners on the capital side. But it is something that we're looking at as well. I know. From our discussions, how you would feel about increasing fare, but I think at the same time we need to look at that because we've got to make sure that we have enough revenue to deliver. It's one thing to be able to do the capital projects. At the end of the day, we have to make sure we have the people to deliver those capital projects. These systems don't run themselves, like building a highway where you have people who are actually driving those cars and trucks. Here we have to hire them. So it is a concern. I mean, what you're addressing is a concern for us.
Okay, yeah, it would be nice to know that. Yes, it's easy to find the how much the revenue is because you can just you count up the tickets and it's 5.9%. But how much it costs to enact that is the unknown, I guess. And I'm just trying to see how close, how small or large that number is in relationship to the rest of the revenue sources. So, and I think you can probably figure that out. I know you can.
Okay, Councilmember Young, and then Pui.
Yeah, I know we're probably short on time, so I'll try and be brief. When I'm looking at both the budget presentation as well as the strategic goals and objectives, there's a component that I just don't see clearly articulated, although I'm sure it's a part of your work. But to me, it's one of the most key issues related to the budget, which is the ridership, and looking at the number of individuals that are actually engaging in that system and how then that is helping to drive a goal in terms of we would like to see more people like within those systems. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so it begins with organizational excellence. So we have to have an organization that can deliver the service and deliver it sustainably. So once we have that, which is, I consider the trunk of the tree, our two focuses are quality of life and customer experience. So we want to ensure that our customers have the best experience they can on the system. And number two is that we are improving quality of life throughout the valley. So to your point, air quality is a big component of that, as well as access to transit. Our numbers have been increasing. We are going to be up for the year at least 10% over the previous year. And I don't like to do this, but I'll do it anyway. When we compare our numbers to pre-pandemic, we're now over 80% system-wide in terms of where we were in 2020. And I can tell you nationally, that's a very strong number. On FrontRunner alone, we're now in October, the end of October, we were at 75% of capacity. 75% of capacity, which is incredibly strong. So everything that we do is around improving access by customers to our lines. Everything that we do related to transit-oriented development and putting energy and effort into sustainable transit communities is focused on increasing ridership. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think I'm looking at it as a complementary data set in terms of the access is certainly important, but so are the number of individuals that are then on that system. And my passion for that and my concern for that is also being able to look at then how are we making budgetary decisions by saying if we establish a new route in this high needs area, we would expect higher ridership.
Right. So that would be all part of our planning process, and we have service design guidelines that helps us determine whether if we're adding additional service here, we're adding additional service, where are we getting, forgive the trite saying, with the best bang for the buck. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is bringing in the ridership. A good example of that is South Salt Lake County, where we had run Flex and Fix before that with limited ridership, and we saw a model that was going to be able to get us corner to corner in lower densely populated areas, and it's been hugely successful. So much so that we've identified along our heat maps areas where we can actually reinstitute Flex or Fix service that would, because we now have enough support. Once people start taking transit, they tend to get addicted to it. That's why our core ridership is 18 to 34, and one of the reasons we have our pass programs that we start now at a secondary level is that 50% of the students who have pass programs stay on transit, and actually, 75% of them stay on transit, 50% stay on as power users. So
I think
hope that helps.
Having that data set included in future presentations would just help me in terms of being able to understand how those two interrelate.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that that's part of it as well. And Russ, you want to jump in?
I'm going to assume this will work. Hi, Russ Fox. I'm the planning director for UTA, and I thought maybe it'd just be helpful just to talk about right now, Salt Lake City sponsors 4 routes, right? You sponsor the 1, the 2, the 9, and the 21, as was mentioned. And just to kind of give you some ideas on the ridership numbers, it's pretty impressive. With those routes going from a 30-minute service back in 2019, because that's when we first started some of those, to 2023. The number 1 route was just added last year, and that had immediate success. Already 2,000 boardings a day. That was just really, really incredible. So that's been a highly successful route to have that incorporated. And then just some percentage increases when we did when we added the number 9, that had almost a 300% increase by adding that, going from a 30-minute service to a 15-minute service. And the 21 stayed about the same, but it still has a pretty good ridership. It's competing with the 2019 numbers, as Jay was saying, not to have that as a comparison. So the investments that the city has been making into those, as far as like that $6 million, that as far as I can prove in that service, it was really just showing some really great numbers for us as far as like how that's serving the community and serving those riders.
And that data makes a huge difference for us as a council to then, when we have budgetary decisions, be able to say, yes, that's something we can continue to support, and there's data there for that. So I appreciate your follow-up.
Yeah, and the last thing I was just going to say, just to answer the question on the additional routes, as far as like the additional service that we're looking at, we have our 5-year service plan. One of the next routes that we would be working with Salt Lake City on is the number 4 route, and that's the one that goes along Foothill Boulevard, right? That serves that area. Right now, because of our limitations, it's hard for us to add that in, so we're kind of at a standstill with that. But eventually, I think we could start looking at what that would be the next route we would target as far as like that supported service. But our 5-year service plan also then talks about it's a split 2 route. It would split it from 2A to 2B that would then serve the medical center and that kind of area. So it's increasing that amount of service. So we have plans for that, and we're going to be we look at that every 2 years, and we'll be providing that those updates to what those future plans are for that service.
Okay, Councilmember Pui and then Councilmember Wharton.
Very quickly for me, I keep on hearing from my neighbors and the Fair Park director that many of the business in the West Side, prison, the airport, that we are not doing enough, right? And they, they're talking about collectively, right, that we're not doing enough for transit. And I know that Salt Lake City has partnered up we're partnered up together to bring some of those solutions. I guess the question for me, if those lines are being successful and they're growing, the lines that Salt Lake City is partnering with you, at what point Salt Lake City could step away from that and say, they're being successful, right? And now can we help on something else, right? And I'm sure that is a budgetary question, and it seems like Salt Lake City is taking a bigger role in transportation. And at some point, coming to me is, it seems like we're doing quite a bit of that work here. And I know that your presentation here, this is interesting for me, that we have a budget presentation that we have nothing to do with, right? And I appreciate that taking the time, and I think the new requirement is for you to present to our bodies, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I think is achievable, and I hope that our continued partnership shows that we are working together more, and I know that the state has a bigger role in this budget than we do, but I hope that we can advocate for more, and you can help us advocate for more. Help us know when we need to show up to committee or bring some of our neighbors to those meetings, because I have a lot of need in my part of town for public transportation, reliable, regular public transportation. And just two things. One of those that are being told a lot is about the free fare zone and how it feels silly to how limited it is for the downtown area. Expanding it to the Guadalupe Bridge seems like a logical thing, since it's a very big area. And I know there is a budgetary question to that, and I hope that we can talk about that at some point. And hopefully that's something that I'm personally passionate about. But one last comment, and having used public transportation in other countries, we seem to lag behind about 10 years from third world countries on how we manage our public transportation. And I tell you this, we have diesel. Some of those trains are a little older, or almost as old as I am. on the front runner diesel ones, in a state that, is struggling with our air quality. Those trains driving through my district and near neighborhoods, and I hope that we can advocate eventually to upgrade that fleet. Again, I'm a voice, and I happen to be here, have no pull or push on this issue. But there is technology out there that is being used. We have a Stadler here in our own city making trains, electrical trains, and I'm not saying that we should hire them. I mean, obviously has to be a bid process, but this technology exists to have better trains that are less polluting. But taking the bus and the subway and the train in Chile, for example, was fascinating. And I was able, from Google, to plan my route. I could see, not only like I see it here, that, estimated time, and if I walk across the street, a bus should be there within 2 minutes. In Chile, I can see where that bus is, right there from Google. And I can see the next bus behind it from Google, not from a third-party app, and I appreciate your app. I think but that technology is already being used by other major countries. I feel like we need to coordinate and tie all that up. If I was able to see that from Google, which is one of the most widely used with Google Maps, widely used apps, I think we're going to see more people taking advantage of all the investments that UTA is doing, the state is doing, that we are doing. And ultimately, it seems like we want to see more bodies to justify some of the expenses. So I'm hoping that we can justify some of these connections to make it easy for people to use the system that we already have. Not even talking about expanding the free fare zone or doing more bus routes, but I'm hoping that we can work on that. And please, if I can help, let me know.
That's to tell you you're out of time. Councilor Wharton.
Just really quickly, how much of your, I saw there was a percentage about investment in charging stations. Do you have any idea how many more like electric buses or hybrids you'll be able to add to your fleet in the next year? Just to kind of put it in terms of like real.
So we received a grant for additional CNG buses.
Okay.
One of the things that we're working on for 2024 is building out our charging network so that we can seamlessly continue to add electric buses. We have a long-term plan to convert our fleet over to a clean fleet, and so that's going to happen. Part of that is working with additionally with all of our stakeholders to move that forward, including the city. The one thing that we have that's been helping that is we now have a state commitment to an electrification plan that's being run out of Aspire. We're included on that steering committee, so that's been very helpful. And I'm sorry if I could just go back for 1 second.
Quickly,
one of the things
please.
I'm sorry.
Quick response, please.
All right. Well, the only thing I just wanted to say, we're very much focused on, I realize that air quality, ridership access are really important, but I think at the same time, economic generation is, because that is something that can often bring larger investments into our system. I want to show the return on investment, because I would like not only this council, but everybody within the service area, and when I say I mean UTA as an I, that we want to see that you see us as returning strongly on our investment. We're doing studies on that as well. That's part of our unified transportation planning effort to show what that return is. We have some numbers, but I want to show that in terms of operations alone. What is our operations return to this area? Getting people to work, bringing in events as large as the Olympics, all that, bringing business into this community. I think that will help this council see the justification in continued investment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right, and sorry to cut that short. I know it's an important discussion. We are on item number 7, which is it's a written briefing. Thank you. For an economic development revolving loan fund for Ocean City Seafood Market. So go ahead and read that. We have 2 board appointments that we need to get to, and thank you for the board appointees. We asked you to come an hour and 15 minutes early, and you've been sitting here waiting for us, so I apologize. The first board appointee is Robin Taylor Granda for the City and County Building Conservation and Use Committee, and I believe you're here in person. Is that correct? Hello. Please come up to the front. You can stand at the podium or sit at the table. And we just ask that you introduce yourself to the council. Tell us why you're willing to spend your free time on this committee and why this is of interest to you and anything else you want to share with us.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Robin Taylor Granda. I am applying to be on the Salt Lake City and County Building Conservancy and Use Committee. Did I get it all right?
Yes, it's a mouthful, but
I've seen it
I
written
think you
so
got
many
it
times
correct.
this week. I'm applying to be on there as a replacement for Steve Cornell, who was a representative for Preservation Utah, which is a requirement on that committee to have a representative from our organization. And I am a new employee there. I'm the Historic Properties Programs Manager that I just started with Preservation Utah, and I was asked if I would be interested in being on that committee, and I love this building, so I jumped at the opportunity. My background is in historic preservation. I have a degree from the University of Utah, and I've spent the last 25 years in architecture and engineering, and was thrilled to be back in preservation.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction, council members. Did you have Bob Young? Did you
Yes,
have Bob
I did.
Young as a professor?
Yep. I'm still friends with him on Facebook.
Good.
Because we
Good
see
guy.
each other every year at the historic properties home tours as well.
Yep. I assumed you would have if with that degree. So
Yep.
If you see him, tell him hello for me. and Councilmember Valdemaros. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate anybody's willingness to serve on our boards and committees, especially people with specific professional experience like you obviously do have. And I agree with you. This building is amazing, and it's so unique. It's one of a kind for Utah especially, but even within the world, it's very unique, and appreciate your willingness to serve on that committee. You're going to be on our consent agenda tonight. That's when it becomes official, but you don't need to attend. And thank you for your willingness to serve.
Yeah, I'm excited to have the opportunity to be more involved with this building, so it's great for me.
Mr. Chair, if you remember, we joked about asking the question about the red or the green, if that was a... We have opinions about the colors in here, and we were going to ask everybody that is joining the preservation of this building board if they're okay with maybe possibly changing allowing us to change some of the colors.
I was actually just talking to Preservation Utah's new director is here behind me. She came with me, and I was just saying as we were walking in the hallway, like, I feel like if you have wood, it really needs to pop, and burgundy is not a color that
pop.
Works well.
I
would actually, I'd have to say I'd go with green.
All right. Well, let's think about that. Thank you.
Sorry if that creates more problems between you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service to the city and to Preservation Utah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, the next board appointee is Landon Kurazik to the Planning Commission. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
It's a life hazard I have.
Yes.
It's Karazik, but
Karazik,
it's all good.
okay. You heard the introductions. Just introduce yourself, why you're interested in the Planning Commission, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I am just so passionate about this city. Alejandro knows, like, I'm just in it. I love this place. I am a master's student in the CMP program right now, and have been working a lot in the Glendale region. I believe that cities have the ability to do just incredible things. I think that, like, ecological sustainability is key in cities, reducing individual footprints of what individuals are producing in the world, creating sustainable housing and affordable housing, while also mitigating displacement. That's quite a concern of ours on the west side, that people will be displaced. I think that design is so important. I run a small theater company as my other side thing, where we do public performances in public spaces, where we have magicians and jugglers and tons of different people that try to create vitality and life in our public spaces. And I think that design in our city can make that happen, where we can have vitality and excitement just by being alive, walking outside our doors. And so much of that has to do with like the decisions that are made in planning. And we have such an opportunity with all of the increase in population to be able to make a great place. So I'm stoked to be helping with that.
Excellent. And it's awesome to see students getting involved in our boards and commissions.
Mr. Chair, very quickly, I know, of Landon's involvement, and I also participated on his, I attended, his theater company, and I don't know if you remember this, but it was a bad day for me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you do for the community. I'm very excited to have you representing the West Side District 2, especially too.
Sweet.
I'm excited. You said all the right things, so I appreciate your involvement and your care and how we can make our city an even better city. So thank you, and hope you bring all of that energy to the Planning Commission, so that we can have a better outcome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
You'll
it,
be
guys.
confirmed on tonight's consent agenda.
Okay.
All right. There's no report of the chair or vice chair, unless Councilmember Petro's in the sky. I don't think so. Executive Director Cindy Gus-Jensen.
We just have your annual calendar for you to take a look at, and we'll be able to discuss that at future meetings as well. So just take a look at that, and if you have any things that you notice, like conflicts with travel or conferences or things of that nature, please just let staff know, and then we'll circle back to you at a future meeting to get confirmation or make changes as requested by the council. Thanks.
Thank you. And I am looking for a motion to enter into closed session. There's some motion language on the agenda. We are convening as both the RDA board and City Council.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council and RDA enter into joint closed session to discuss the lease and acquisition of real property and to receive advice of council. After the closed session ends, the RDA meeting will conclude and the council will convene for the formal meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Valdemoros, a second from Councilmember Pui. Any discussion to this motion? Okay, I'll roll call. Councilmember Young?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yes.
Valdemoros?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Pui?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Councilmember Valdemoros is absent, and so that passes 6-0. Oh, is she here?
Petro. He said
Petro. Valdemoros. I'm sorry. That's
I'm
very.
here.
I'm very sorry. You're here. Councilmember Petro is absent. So 6-0, and we are moving into closed session. And after that, we'll be back here in this room for formal at 7. Where is closed session?
It's in the mayor's conference room. They're
Okay.
allowing us to use that again, and you can stop to get your meal on the way at the mayor's break room.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, for letting us use your space.